Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.
We're so pleased to have on the show the creator and an incredible and talented actor, Dean Elliott. And we're talking about the Simon and Garfunkel story. Dean, thanks for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure. It's lovely to meet you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, having watched the trailers and so many pieces of the show and also being a huge Simon and Garfunkel fan myself, we've got to talk about this because, it's done so well with this show that you created that it's taken off again, for 2024 and even coming to Nashville.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, really. It's nearly 10 years ago since I wrote the show. Back, I was living in England, as you can probably tell from my accent, at the time. And you know what? I thought this show would last maybe a tour, a couple of months. And we've now performed in, I think, over 50 countries, which is crazy. It's performed over in Asia. It's performed in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Zimbabwe, all around the Mediterranean, Europe. It's gone through the UK many times, the West End. It had a season in the West End. It's played the London Palladium. And it's played all over North America and Canada, US, the Pantages Theatre, the National Theatre in Washington. I mean, it's blown my mind just how successful this show is, which I think the show is really good. Like, I'm proud of it.
Right. Well, but also I think it speaks to your vision though, also, Dean, because, I've got to brag on you to where the show includes 30 songs from the incredible catalog of Simon and Garfunkel. And also what I think is so unique about this is that you've been able to include the vintage photographs, and the footage and everything, within the video context. And, obviously I'm a fan of this, a full live band.
Yeah, so the show it's their story, right? It says what it is on the tin. It's their story, but it has all those amazing songs. Like the songs are just timeless, and the lyrics are poignant and beautiful and still important. But I think what we get a lot of with our show is people say, I just felt like I was taken back to the 60s, like the look of it, the way that the visuals work with the lighting and the performance. You just think, wow, like I'm here with Simon and Garfunkel in like 1964 or whatever, back in Greenwich Village or back at Central Park or whatever. And I'm getting that because, our cast are young, like, they're early 20s, which, Simon and Garfunkel were at that time. They were kids, right? So,
well, it's so interesting to me too, on it, Dean, and certainly, to your vision, to where I think a lot of people forget that, they won 10 Grammys, they sold over 100 million albums. Certainly, they were huge, before our time, but it's like, but I also grew up listening to their music, from my parents and just being around it. And that it was just truthfully a short window to where you're able to encapsulate this, during the 60s, back to the Tom and Jerry days, which some, people may not realize they used to be called, to their, incredible hits, playing, and then to the demise of the band in 1970, but also then the reunion in, I believe, 1981, right?
Correct. Yeah, Central Park, 1981. Yeah, it's true. I mean, their stories untold and fascinating, and I think you get that from the show. You understand a little bit more of who they were and why they split up at the height of their fame. I mean, they were on top of the world. They're the only act I know of where their final album is like multi-Grammy award, like biggest selling album of like 3 years in a row, like, and then they're like, we're done.
Exactly. It's like right then. But you know what it reminded me of too, Dean, and I know you're a student of bands and musicians and everything as well, but it seems like it's also one of those timeless stories to where you constantly hear this with other bands and with other family bands, whether it be the Black Crowes or whomever. It's a story that constantly continues to happen. It's just it happened to them, Simon and Garfunkel back in the 60s, like I said, at the height of their popularity. And I mean, what really, when you created this, 10 years ago now, and you've seen it just prosper so much, what drove you? Because I got to brag on you a little bit to where you also starred in Buddy, the Buddy Holly story. and you worked in, Over the Rainbow and everything. So obviously, and the number of BBC shows. So you've got a vision. You're in tune with the music. Why Simon and Garfunkel? Why did this feel like the right thing for you?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I was an actor, musician back in the UK. And I was working in Buddy, the musical, which is obviously huge,
Right.
And it was in the West End for 18 years, 20, something.
And award winning too. I've got to brag on you.
Oh, yeah, bless you. Thank you. Yeah, but so I was doing that and I was just going through my CD collection, and I was like, whose story hasn't been told? And I was like, you know what, Simon and Garfunkel, it's not the rock and roll jump around of Buddy or of Jersey Boys. So I was like, oh, well, people, want to get up and see it because, people go see those shows because it's feel good.
Right.
Like every time I listen to Simon and Garfunkel, I feel good,
Yeah.
So I was like, well, why not? And then I read a couple of biographies on them just to get educated myself a little bit on it. And I was like, wow, this is I didn't know any of this, and I'm a fan. Like I had all their albums, all 5 of their main albums. And I was like, oh, and then, you know what? And this was a real penny drop for me, was they start off, as you said, Tom and Jerry, a little rock and roll double act. And then they go super folky, like really folky, like Wednesday morning. And then they just musically get more complex. And I thought, as a piece of theatre, this is fascinating because you really, and Buddy, the musical, I think, and I'm sure, many people hearing or watching this are really, really aware that, he died at the height of his.
Oh, totally. From the plane crash.
Correct. Right. So that show just snatches it away, and it's done so beautifully and very sad, obviously. And I thought, well, the same thing can kind of happen with Simon and Garfunkel. We build them up, the music gets stronger, the story gets better, they're winning, they're and then suddenly, boom. And then the payoff, a bit like Buddy the musical, is they reform, they come back, they do the hits, they do Bridge Over Troubled Water, they do the Boxer, and you leave going,
right. I think what, for you, Dean, I think what, being an actor and a musician yourself, to where it gives you that unique perspective that a lot of people don't, because once again, when you mentioned Buddy Holly, huge fan of Buddy Holly, just the songs and everything, even though once again, before our time, for some of us, to where the songs still resonate. And like you said, it's just that buildup. But with Simon and Garfunkel, I was thinking, what kind of process do you go through to hire the musicians? Because as you mentioned, not only lyrically complex, but also instrumentally complex. I mean, a lot of the things that Paul Simon was doing on guitar and everything, they just kept getting, bigger and better. How do you choose the band members?
Yeah, it's a really good, we spend a lot of time casting. We do a lot of casting. So we cast in London and we cast in New York. And the 2 things we need to find, which we've got better at, because obviously, it takes time, because it is 2 very different people. You need a person who looks kind of Paul Simon, can't be too tall.
Right.
He wasn't the tallest of chaps. But it is the guitar playing. It's the guitar playing, his Travis style of picking.
Yes.
And really they have to have a real mastery of the acoustic guitar. And then on the other side, we need to find a guy. Now, Art Garfunkel, I personally think, is one of the greatest singers of all time.
Totally.
But he's not formally trained. We get a lot of like straight out of musical theater school kids, and you're like, he didn't sound like that.
Not gonna work. Yeah.
And I'm like, you need to smoke more, because he just didn't care. It was 60s, and he did him, right? And it's beautiful. So we actually, what we do is we have to kind of take away the training. We say, look, lose that control, put more breath in, float it, and work with them. And actually, some singers are able to do that and some aren't. But then the big question is, okay, your hair, we need to do something with that. And I can honestly say we've been perming young men's hair
That's like a whole division of
Yeah,
this,
like
right? It's like
10
going, well, we
years.
have to do the hair treatments.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, like, when I look back on these 10 years, I'm just gonna have to get all of our Art Garfunkels, like before and after
Right.
shot, right? And some of them, like, we've got a guy in the UK at the moment who naturally has very curly blonde hair, but some of them we've had to go like full on, like, okay, let's
I
get
never
you.
even thought of that. How incredible. Well, I've got to ask you this too, Dean, to where certainly this has been so popular with the Simon and Garfunkel story, and I don't want you to give away any trade secrets, but are you working on something new that might come out in the next year or so also that you could possibly tease?
Yeah, well, actually, we've just, and I'm glad to be speaking to you. I just spent a lot of time in Nashville with the Johnny Cash family.
Oh, incredible.
And we just played actually Johnny Cash, the official concert experience in Nashville a couple of weeks ago. And that is it's similar to Simon and Garfunkel Story, but we're partnering with the Johnny Cash family, and we've used a lot of footage on the screen. So we've taken out the band, so he sings with the band, so it's a bit more multimedia with the Johnny Cash TV show. But that's touring next year. I'm not 100% sure how close it gets to Nashville, but that is it's a fabulous show. I love it, and I love the music of Johnny Cash. And
What a catalog.
oh my gosh,
It's like, and it amazed me too. And I mean, and certainly you being a student of music as well and a musician, to where, even before Johnny Cash passed away, the kids were embracing him again. He was playing out on these rock and roll tours.
Yeah.
And everybody was going, oh my gosh, we loved, and he had like that resurgence.
Yeah, the whole Rick Rubin resurgence. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But it was a joy. I mean, I love Nashville. I've been 4 or 5 times. I was there last month. And for a British guy who is, a scholar of music and a lover of history, to spend time with John Carter Cash, Johnny Cash's son, and spend time at the house in Hendersonville, and go to the Johnny Cash Museum, and like walk around downtown, go to the Johnny Cash Bar and Grill, and just I was just like when you pinch yourself sometimes, I'm like, this is... And I felt the same way, like I was in New York, for Simon and Garfunkel, and I met Art Garfunkel. And I was just like, I was in like Bleecker Street, and I was like, well, this is it. Like this, as a fan, I'm such a huge fan of music, and like I said, history of music. So, and sometimes, when you're doing these shows, you kind of forget that these are real stories, these are real people, these are real lives, these are real emotions, and then when the worlds collide, you're like, oh my gosh, this is great. So,
but I think what's amazing about this too, Dean, to me, is that with your ear and being a scholar of music and a musician, to where you're able to bring this to people to where they can bring their families. Obviously, not only people that grew up with Simon and Garfunkel or with the Johnny Cash music, but also bring the kids along. And just like you were talking Jersey Boys. I think having those kind of immersive experiences for all generations, it just brings the music home, because great music, as we both know, lives on. I mean, no matter what, as long as the music is there, and then the way that you're able to intertwine that story, it's just, I mean, what a gift.
Yeah, it's funny. I have 3 very young children, and from an early age, they loved Cecilia. It's just like their favorite song. Like, and Cecilia, and they're just sort of bouncing around the house, jumping up and down, And I'm just like, you can go from that, which is like a fun, almost kid-like song, nursery rhyme, to something like The Sound of Silence, which lyrically, that song is, nearly 60 years old. And you're like, that is like, if you had the lyrics and you read it as a poem, you'd just be like, this is incredible.
It's art.
Yeah, of course. And then you go to like America, which is this love letter to this country, so and then you've got like comedy songs, sarcastic songs, you've got poignant songs, you've got sad songs, and then you've got Bridge Over Troubled Water, which is just it's like if everyone could just follow those lyrics, putting your hand out to your neighbor and saying, look, when you're down and out, I've got you, and it's just like, wow, like they are amazing. So you're right, it's universal, any age, no one's going to be like, oh, this is kind of boring, or and the story is fascinating. And I tell you what, like, seeing our Art Garfunkel sing Bridge Over Troubled Water
Right.
towards the end of the show, you got to wait around.
Yeah, but that's great. You hold them.
You hold them is worth the ticket price alone. Like, it is so good. Like, it is like, I'm in tears, and I've seen it probably about 1,000 times. Like,
yeah, but I mean,
but
what a great thing to be able to combine that, with your knowledge of theater and actually, being trained and being, a talent yourself, but also being able to merge that with the theater, with the story, with the music. It's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of, as we were talking about, with the footage and with the photos to really, bring that forth, and with your choice of actors and actresses for this. I mean, what an incredible deal with the Simon and Garfunkel story. I think, I have a feeling, Dean, that you may need to extend this tour again. That, I know you're only planning on 24 or 25 dates for 2024, but I've got a feeling it's going to keep going. You may have to hire some extra people.
Yeah, well, this show continually surprises me. I'm always like, oh, okay, so we're doing this next. It was funny. I was last week. I was chatting to somebody, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we've got an offer to come to Argentina," and I'm like, "Okay, all right, I like that. That's great." Right. And another place we're going to in March is the Philippines, and I'm like, "Wow, okay, so we're taking the Simon and Garfunkel story for 2 nights at the Philippines." Okay,
but it goes back to what you said, also, Dean. The music is universal.
Exactly, universal, and I think everybody gets them. I think, but I must say, the music, the songwriting is phenomenal. But when you hear that harmony, that classic Simon and Garfunkel harmony, that for me is the bit which you go, yeah, that's great. Like, and I don't, Everly Brothers are awesome. I love the Everly Brothers.
Definitely.
But I think there is something about the blend of Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel in the 60s that you just, when you hear it, you just think, oh man, that's amazing. And,
so unique.
And we get to take that around the world and share that, which is just awesome. I love it.
And another new show launching, your Johnny Cash show. But I want to make sure, for the Simon and Garfunkel tour, Dean, where do our viewers need to go to get tickets early? I know you're coming through Nashville, touring, North America. For the website, for the social media, where do our viewers need to go?
Yeah, so all the dates are on the simonandgarfunkelstory.com. So www.thesimonandgarfunkelstory.com. We've got a Facebook page, which is super active. So there's lots, you can find the dates on there. You can find footage, videos, interviews, all that sort of stuff on the Simon and Garfunkel Story on Facebook. It's also on Instagram. And then I guess your local show is February the 1st. Next year, 2024, which is coming around very quickly, and that's at 7:30 p.m. at the James K. Polk Theatre.
Just amazing. Well, I can't wait to hear more. I think you're gonna have to come back on the show, Dean, with the Johnny Cash story also. But I can't wait to see the Simon and Garfunkel. Watching the videos and the trailers and everything. I can't wait to see this full show in person. Hear the 30 incredible songs, all from your vision. And with and with your daughters jumping around singing Cecilia, which who doesn't like that song? I mean, really, yeah, it's amazing. Well, Dean Elliott, it is so great talking with you. Congratulations on the Simon and Garfunkel story continuing, and what a great job you've done with this. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of a Bobby Bones Show.